from NPR. Reversing U.S. policy. Trump attacks Zelensky, blames Ukraine for war with Russia. Now, I mean, I'm going to say right out front, like, it's not Zelensky's fault that Putin invaded. The whole thing is Barack Obama's fault for telling Medvedev that Putin could go in after his election.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It was when Barack Obama said to Medvedev, he said, tell Vladimir that after my election, I will have more latitude. And after the election, that's when the little green men started showing up in Crimea. That's when Putin went into Crimea and took Crimea. It was because he understood Barack Obama as saying, the U.S. will not get involved. You can go in after my election. So it's not because of Zelensky, it's because of Barack Obama.
And look, I want to be very clear. I have no doubt who the bad guy is here. However,
Barack Obama.
I feel like that's the answer to a lot of that. I know who the bad guy is, Barack Obama. But no, look, obviously Putin's not a great guy. Obviously, he shouldn't have invaded Ukraine. But I think the Trump angle is just the same way he looks at everything else differently. We've been doing foreign policy with Russia the same way since the end of World War II, and we have gotten virtually nowhere.
Yeah. Let me go ahead. The NPR reports Washington and Kiev. For the past 3 years, the U.S. has been Ukraine's leading supporter in its war with Russia. Yet with a series of blunt comments, President Trump is now sounding more aligned with Russia than Ukraine. Trump, writing on social media, used his strongest language to date in describing Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy a dictator without elections. Zelenskyy better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. With limited room for maneuver, Zelenskyy has said relatively little, but he did strike a nerve when he said Wednesday that Trump seems to be living in a Russian-created disinformation space. It's my sense, and I think we talked about this a little bit at the very beginning of the show, it's my sense that Donald Trump wants to see Europe actually pay for the defense of Ukraine because Europe has the most to lose. Mm-hmm. European nations have been living off the United States military protection for the better part of 60, 75 years, something like that, since the end of World War II. The United States has taken the lion's share of role in making NATO an intimidating force. There's been a lot of it has been intentional because the United States didn't want to see nuclear proliferation throughout Europe. The United States was trying to keep every country in Europe from getting nuclear weapons because that's just a recipe for disaster. But the U.S. spends, out of our GDP is like $29 trillion. The U.S. spends 3.6% of our GDP on our military. I think the NATO agreement is every country in NATO spend 3% of their, is it 2?
2, yeah.
It's 2% of their GDP on national defense, on their military, which in net dollars is vastly less than the United States, and they don't even meet their requirements to be in NATO, and they haven't forever. The United States used to spend 15%. In 1953, the United States was spending 15% of our GDP, and it's been going down ever since. Like I said, now it's about 3.6 or something like that. But the rest of Europe, who is the most threatened by Russia, won't even pay for their own militaries. They won't actually spend the money on their military. They've been living under the U.S. protection, the United States protections for all of the Cold War and since. And now it's time for the European nations to actually spend the amount of money that they're supposed to spend on their own defense. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the whole goal. Now, there's personal animosity between Zelenskyy and Trump. When Zelenskyy went to Pennsylvania with Josh Shapiro during the election, that definitely pissed Trump off. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with him actually having a problem with that. Why a foreign country that we've been just shoveling money into has their president come and actually pick sides in an election? It's a bad look. And I don't think that there's going to be any way to save the personal relationship between Zelenskyy. It's also worth noting that on Monday, Macron is going to be going to Ukraine to talk to Zelenskyy, and Macron has said that France will stand with Zelenskyy and with Ukraine. And I think that that's a perfect situation. If the French want to go ahead and pick up the tab, fine. I think we're at $70 billion that we've sent to Ukraine so far since the war started in 22, and an additional 70 since 2014 when Barack Obama opened the door for President Putin to invade the first time. So it's time for the U.S. to actually stop paying for this, because there's been no changes. It's just a meat grinder, and Ukraine's going to run out of people to fight.
Mm-hmm. No, and you know what? You are totally right. And just the way Zelenskyy operates, like, wait, you mean you're not going to give me money? Like, I expect this. Not thank you for what you've done so far. When it comes to foreign policy, I've spent my entire life, I'm 35. Why? And it happened long before this. That every time there's an international conflict or a crisis somewhere, whether it's an earthquake or a landslide or a famine, something happening, the entire United Nations all get together and they look down the row and they go, "Hey, America, you guys got this, right?" And I'm sitting over here going, we are struggling. We have problems. There are people freezing to death in a tent in Western North Carolina right now, and I don't know what the NATO nations have done about it. I don't remember getting a lot from North Macedonia. I don't think we're getting a lot from Slovenia. If we got invaded right now and the Slovenians were like, "Hey, guys, we're on the way," do you feel safer about that? But no, we're paying for their top line expense, and then we get to be lectured to by the Europeans. Well, we have free schools, we have free healthcare, we have free this. Of course, because you're not paying the most. If somebody was paying my mortgage, I could afford to drive a Lamborghini because I'm not paying the most expensive thing in my life. And it is so frustrating to see all the other countries lecture America instead of sitting back, shutting up, and saying, "Thank you, Daddy."
Yeah.
I am sick of being I'm sick of being the sugar daddy of the world. And I'm sorry it falls on Ukraine right now, but this is just the times we're living in.
It's the truth. I mean, a lot of my lefty friends always remind me, like, "Oh, I wish I lived in Europe. Oh, I wish I lived there." I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you do, because essentially you're living in this little colony of the United States where we give you guys a ton of money so you can live this dream of a lifestyle with all these walkable cities and all this nonsense. Meanwhile, the American guy is working ridiculous hours under all these crazy regulations to get enough money to feed his family, and yet everybody can go and have a wonderful evening out in Copenhagen, whatever. It's just not, it's not fair. Copenhagen's a little bit out, they're their own thing, but I'm saying, like, for instance, I would like to say France, I'd like to say England, but a lot has changed there recently, so I don't know, but they like to complain anyways. They glow online.
I see my European friends, they're on vacation in the Canary Islands.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, I have a hard time getting to Philly.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just sitting and it's like, why? I feel like if you work a 40-hour work week, the first 8 hours you work goes to foreign aid. Yeah. That's what it feels like. And it's not 80% of the time. It's not 90% of the time. It's every time something happens, everyone just looks around and goes, "Well, America will take care of it." Yeah. Meanwhile, like, even in the lefty paradise of California, like, all that money that we've given to Ukraine could be spent to go rebuild the people in California who, if we went $36 trillion in debt and we had, like, airplanes that didn't fall out of the sky and roads that didn't have potholes and kids that could read, I probably wouldn't mind that we were in debt. But the fact that we're borrowing money from China to protect Taiwan from China seems like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. I know you've got a lot of foreign policy opinions. What are your thoughts on Europe and the spending and the treatment of Vladimir Zelenskyy by President Trump?
I think it's extremely commendable that Donald Trump is making an effort to end wars both in Eastern Europe and the Middle East right now. And I think this rhetoric is trying to manage the expectations of the Ukrainians. In a way, with rhetoric like this, he's kind of letting them know your aspirations of getting back Crimea and Donbass kind of aren't going to happen. And he's
been the narrative that Zelensky's has been pushing, that they're getting back Donbass.
Well, he has to. He'd be extremely unpopular. Guess what? In Ukraine, they want the Donbass and Crimea back.
Sure,
but I do disagree with the specifics of what he was saying. I don't think Ukraine started this conflict. So hopefully it's just here's the thing. As we hand off this conflict to the Europeans, because we are more interested in what's going on in the Pacific, where more of the world is being centered now, Europe's becoming old news. Ukraine, after a settlement is reached here, I foresee the Europeans not picking up the tab, and then eventually actually more of Ukraine getting bitten off. If we didn't support Ukraine to begin with, I think all of Ukraine would have fallen, which were the ambitions of Putin. And thanks to the money spent and the weapons sent over there, the Ukrainians were bravely able to fight themselves. We didn't spill American blood in Ukraine, and the Ukrainians proudly fought off the Russians. So, this is a negotiating ploy. If the Europeans do not step up, and if the Americans do decide to take a full step back, I foresee Putin just steamrolling through Ukraine down the line. It was part of the Russian Empire. It was part of the Soviet Union. And Putin is an irredentist who believes that the fall of the Soviet Union was the greatest tragedy of his life, the greatest geopolitical tragedy of his life. So I think we're going to see more ambitions of Putin as a result of this.
But here's the question.
Hold on. Is it your sense that Putin actually does want to move into Europe and, like, say, get Poland and get the former Soviet states back?
Within Putin's lifetime, was Poland part of the USSR or the Warsaw Pact?
It was the Warsaw Pact.
Yeah, so the other country, like, I do believe that he wants to claw back as much former USSR countries as he can, or former Russian Empire countries. Yeah, because he lost territory within his lifetime. He's seen his country collapse into pieces. So totally, I think that's within his ambition to return Russia, in his mind, to its rightful place in world politics, where he sees Russia as a major world power. They've kind of been delegated to kind of an afterthought right now, but the Russian demographics are horrible too. Russia's going to struggle to move forward. I know we like to talk about Ukraine and their struggling demographics, but beyond the war, Russia's in a complete demography collapse. Mary, what do you think about Ukraine?
Well, what I wonder with looking at the combination of, first of all, like Trump's Truth Social post excoriating Zelenskyy, along with him meeting with Putin, excluding Zelenskyy to Zelensky's deep dismay. I just wonder, like, what is the the face-saving move for Trump to make this not look like letting Russia win, basically?
I think
they're going to get what they want, and Putin doesn't actually want to throw his hands up and call it a day. He wants his objectives met.
Is it your sense that he wants to take all of Ukraine?
Well, I don't pay close attention, but my sense is that he's not going to make compromises in negotiations.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.